Howdy all of you delicious people, I'm here today to review Smallville Season 1, Episode 21, and Smallville Season 2, Episode 1. So, immediately my favorite thing about Episodes 21 and 1 is that we have a story between Lex and Lionel that is freaking amazing, and then everything else is just there. It's like, oh, okay, great. This is just like the same thing that we've gone on and done through any other show that's ever been done before, as well as like stuff that has already happened through this show already. We've already had somebody going on and finding out Clark's secret and want to blackmail Clark or Jonathan about it, and Jonathan has to go on and deal with that secret being possibly to be put out there. And so, like, we've already gone to this well, we've already done it, and it'll probably be done a whole heck of a lot more, because really we just have to go on and write uncreative ways to write us out of certain episodes and have story arcs about certain things, because nothing better to do. We also have a dance to end the first season. I'm like, wow, that seems so unique. Every single high school show that has ever been a thing usually ends the season with a dance, and this show is no different. But then also we have like this disaster theme going on in these episodes, which will end up carrying on into other seasons, because again, they don't really have much of ideas of how to like write them out of certain things going on. So horrible weather event, because why not? But the thing that I also like about this episode is finally we have Clark that seems to finally have a date that he is there for the third of. And we also have Clark that seems to actually have a relationship with him and Chloe, showcasing them kissing, and of course Lana, who is to be upset about this, is to be walking off like, "Ma, like Clark and Chloe are now together, huh? But I've consistently wanted to go to Whitney and try to break things off, but it just didn't work. Everything just F's up within this story, huh?" So, with that all to be said, people are leaving the show because they can, and on top of that, the way they end season 1 with a to be continued is like, really? I hate that the most about any movie or any show, that is to be like, oh, this person will return in another so-and-so movie. I'm like, really? Didn't think there would be. Didn't think this person was going to return and do other things. Or we have like the to be continued at the end of the Matrix second film, and I'm like, what a stupid thing that was. Why not just end it and don't give us the to be continued? That immediately just has me going like, what the fuck? Because I get ticked off by that stuff. You could have just ended the episode and not have given me the to be continued, and I would have been fine. But once that slaps right on the screen, I'm like, I hated that immensely. Again, even though I could go on and easily see the episode. And so, in Season 2, Episode 1, we focus on the aftermath of the whole horrific disaster event, and what has to have gone on with Jonathan and Nixon, as well as what is to go on between Lex and Lionel, as well as what is to happen between the possible relationship between both Clark and both Chloe. Spoilers, if there's a whole reason why I'm saying that, there's probably a significant reason why. I love you, Chloe. I love you, Clark. Anyways, yeah, let's go on. So, any of the extra characters in this episode are to really just be doctors, or like they didn't really add anybody to just kind of be like, oh, he's gonna be the next villain of the next season, or oh, like we're gonna add this character in to tell you how important this character will be. No, they don't do anything of that. So let's go on and double five this bad boy up because it's about that time. Let's just go into, of course, spoilers, so I can get all of this out of the way and cover everything. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil these episodes. So, in the beginning of episode 21, we have Lionel, who is to make his way to the crap factory to have Lionel go on and talk to Lex. And Lex is to talk to all like the guys, just kind of like, yeah, like we've made a killing lately, and Lionel is gonna go on and praise us. So the guys are like, yeah, this is gonna be great. So Lex is going on and telling Lionel how this factory has improved, or this plant has improved, and that the people here should be hearing nothing but praise coming from Lionel. And Lionel's like, yeah, sure, yeah, I'll get to that. So Lionel gets onto the podium and is to go on and tell everybody, it's like, well, yeah, like it seems like you guys have gone on to like have a much improvement. And so, but here is also the thing, because of managerial issues, I am going to go on and close this plant immediately. And everybody's like, so what? Like, I'm out of a job. He took my job. He took my job. And so Lex is like, oh my god, like I'm going to get lynched for this. And so Lex is turning to Lionel like, how could you? And Lionel, of course, is like, well, Lex, like I told you I wanted you in Metropolis, and so like now you've kind of forced my hand, and so like now you're gonna come with me to Metropolis whether you want to or not, because now this plant is not a thing. And so Lex is to go on and gather all these like executive guys, or the guys that are at the highest position in this plant, and to tell them like, hey, we're gonna go on and we're going to figure out a buyout, like cooler heads will prevail here. We're going to go to the bank and we're going to like try to keep this plan afloat by ourselves. It's like, who cares about Lionel? We're going to do this because I believe that we're going to pull this off. So now that I've covered all of that stuff, let's go on and let's go to a picnic. So Whitney is to go on and cover the eyes of Lana. And I'm like, this is one person that you should not go on and cover the eyes of, because she will trip and fall and crack her neck, and Whitney will need to go on and try to like take Lana to the hospital because she's dead. And like, this woman should not be going on and getting her hands blindfolded through this. It should not happen, because she will die. So Whitney is covering the eyes of Lana, and so Lana comes to find out that she has made her way to this picnic. So they both sit down, and it seems when Lana is wanting to just interrupt Whitney to say that she wants to break up with him, because I guess now would be the perfect time, because Lana has just been waiting and scouting this moment. And it continues to backfire, as well as it does now. So Whitney is to mention that he had went through his father's stuff. Now I guess getting over the grieving process to kind of look through his dad's things. And Whitney is to find out that his father had these certain trophies that his father did not go on to tell him about. And I'm immediately in my brain thinking, I'm like, the guy was in the military and he didn't want to go on and tell you about this heroic tale. I don't buy that whatsoever. But no offense to anybody that has gone on into the military and doesn't tell people stories. Uh, but like for me, in my brain, I'm like, well, I know like for absolute certain, like if a person is going to tell you a tale about the experience that they are to go on and have in the military, they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you a number of times. And so I'm sorry about the person that I'm kind of technically saying this about. But yeah, like you're going to hear this story, and I don't get it that Whitney is to, of course, not have heard this story at least once. So Lana is to look at these awards, and so Whitney is to show Lana these awards because he realizes that it's a sign that he should really go on here and follow in his father's footsteps and go into the Marines, because Whitney does not want to go on and turn around and be stuck in that store like Whitney had mentioned that his life may have forcibly headed to. And so Lana has realized that Whitney has dropped this bomb on her, and she's now very sad about this news. So cue us up to have Clark going on and making his way to Chloe to talk about this whole moment. That Clark is telling Chloe, it's like, well, hey, did you hear that like Whitney's leaving for the military? And Chloe's like, yeah. And Chloe's to mention, because the plant may be shutting down, that her and her father may have to leave Smallville to go to Metropolis, and that may break up this couple here. And so Clark is to realize that he may go on and lose two friends here. And Chloe's to also say that the only reason why Clark is coming to Chloe about this whole news is because Chloe is thinking that Clark is going to take this opportunity to run off to Lana to confess that he loves her. And Clark is like, no, like, you and me, like, we're together right now. And, like, when really looking at it, I don't know how many times we had these, like, almost moments between Clark and Lana anyways, where, like, Clark is just kind of done with that for now, to be with someone new. That it seems that Chloe is to, like, slowly but surely just leave these hints that she's interested in Clark. Even though at the end of it, it seems that Pete is to confess that he liked Chloe at one point within the show. So, Clark is to find out about the whole plant, and Clark is to go on and talk to his parents, who are also shocked about this news because this was a big thing for Smallville, was a LexCorp crap factory. And so Clark is like, well, I didn't think that this would like factor into us because we're a farm, and but they're like, no, like this is like a big thing, like because of all the jobs that are to be lost and this and that. And so Clark is like, well, yeah, that does make sense. So Clark is to make his way to Lex and Clark has asked Lex, it's like, well, hey, uh, like, how are things? Like, how are you? And Lex is just like, well, like, you know about the story, right? And Lex is to mention that he's like, well, like, I think the way this is going to be written really is two different things, but that mostly Lex was blindsided about all this and that he was incompetent. And Clark is like, no, you're going to figure things out. You're gonna go on, and if anybody can figure this out, Lex, it's you. Because of course Lex Luthor does have an absurdly big IQ. I don't think the show really goes on to showcase that, but in all of the other Superman stories, Lex goes on to have this massive IQ, to make him a genius level intellect. And so if Lex is to not already have a big head, then he will go on and of course like be intelligent also and skilled and experienced. So we have also at some point in this episode where Clark is to bump into Nixon. And Nixon, of course, is to tell Clark that he wants to do a whole story about him. And Clark is like, okay, that's unusual. And so all of a sudden, Lex comes into the room and realizes Nixon's there. Is like, oh, hey, yeah, like you're that guy from the Inquisitor, right? Like, who writes that trash? And to basically have Lex kind of disown Nixon and say that he's never met him before, as Clark is to ask, like, do you know that guy? And Lex is like, no, never heard of him before. So we also had Clark when he was wanting to go and speak to Lex. Clark was going to try and work in to see if he could borrow Lex's limo to bring Chloe to this dance so we can kind of wow her. And of course, we like to have Lex kind of help Clark do these kind of like these one of a kind like moments. So Clark makes his way to his home, finding out about the farm with his parents. So Clark goes on and is to do his chores, and he's just very upset about all that's breaking down for Smallville, to the point of him ramming these wood pieces, these spiked wood pieces, into the ground. Yeah. And so Clark then turns around to go into the truck to start this truck, and the truck explodes as Nixon is to watch off in the distance to see what is to happen here. Would you imagine Clark died here and the show would have ended because explosions are Superman's kryptonite and we find that out finally? No. Clark gets out of this truck, chucks the door, and rips off his shirt. And if we already hadn't had Tom Welling justify in Talkville that every time that Clark is to be shirtless, there needs to be a way to write that into the story. It can't just be like, oh, well, Clark is shirtless now because he's changing from pajamas to his normal clothes. No, that's not going to work in this story. And that everything has to be a build up to Tom Welling being shirtless. So, but we've already seen Lana in, like, everything. And I mean everything. As far as clothing or the lesser amount of clothing is concerned. So, Clark should have realized that this explosion was very unusual, but I guess he just writes it off as like, oh no, no, like this is a normal Tuesday. A car just explodes next to me, and or explodes while I'm in it. It's a normal day in Smallville. So we have Clark speaking with Chloe, and so Clark is to admit that he tried to get a limo for them to drive their way to this dance with this driver, and that just didn't pan out. And Chloe's like, well, hey, like, I can get ready and I can drive you. It's not a problem. So yeah, like we have that whole moment with both Clark and Chloe kissing. Lana is to spot this moment and is to already be sad that Whitney is leaving, but then is to also be sad that Clark is to be smooching up to somebody. Smooching! So Lex is to go on and plan this whole buyout situation, and Lionel's like, no. No. I've already figured that out, Lex, that was going to be your master plan. And so Lionel comes to see Lex and is to tell him that, hey, like, the one place that you're going to go to try and figure out this whole you buying this plant with like your mother's shares and everything like that, like, I'm going to go on and buy the bank that you're going to do this deal in, and if one person misses a payment, like, I'm going to come after them like it's nobody's business. I'm going to foreclose them as quickly as possible because I own the bank. And Lex is just like, well, like, that's fine, but I'm going to try to go on and save these people, save this town. So I'm trying to think of what other things I might have missed here. Um, so when Clark was to also meet up with Lex, Clark was also to realize in his office, his mansion office, that Lex is to have a piece of Kryptonian artifact, and Clark is to write it off as some paperweight, and Lex is like, yeah, I don't really know what this is, but hey, like, better be safe than sorry. So, writing that off as well. So, for this episode, we have Clark, who is to go with Chloe to go to the dance. And before the dance even started, we had Whitney and Lana who go to the dance before everyone else does. And they do this slow dance to, of course, I'm assuming a song that has already been played at some point during the season, because that usually happens. And so they're both dancing to this song, and then Lana is to take Whitney to go to the or the bus station to go off to be enlisted into the Marines. So Clark and Chloe are to go off to this dance, and they're reflecting on the fact that Clark is to be at this dance, and like, Clark is actually here because normally he isn't on dates. He like disappears before it even happens, leaving the person like left there for hours wondering what happened to Clark. So Clark at some point is to be with Pete to realize that the band that is playing is Remy Zero. And this, of course, is the same people who were to go on and do the theme song for the show, as well as other songs that had slipped in to probably a number of episodes in either this season or others somewhere down the road. So we also had one point where Pete was to need to have to go on and change what he was going to wear for the spring formal, because I guess if both Clark and Pete wore the same thing, weirdly they would both get confused. Okay, I guess that was a weird, goofy joke, but when really looking at it, like, sometimes I guess if you have couples wearing the same thing, they're like, oh, who is that? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's that other person. So they're going on this dance. So now we have some horrible bad weather that happens. Lana, of course, is to be driving her way probably home to find out that there is tornadoes touching down nearby her, as she is to lose control of her car, swerve into this ditch, which that should have been the perfect place for Lana to stay. But Lana continues to go into this car and is to try to call out for help, like phone call. She's not calling for Clark for the 18th, upteenth time until Clark is actually there. So we have Martha and we have Jonathan that are rushing their way to the cellar, and they find out the cellar is already oddly open. Jonathan notices this. Here's also the thing. Shouldn't have Jonathan and Martha been the chaperones at the spring formal? Because when really thinking about it, in episodes before, Martha was to mention that she was to be asked to do custodial duty for that dance. And, like, did Martha say no to that? Did she not do that? It doesn't make sense. But I guess they had to kind of rewrite that or retcon already within one season of time. So, Martha and Jonathan are to make their way to the cellar to find out that someone is already hiding out in there. And that, of course, is Nixon, who had stolen the octagonal piece to make his way to this cellar to find this spacecraft, to put this octagonal shape in this ship. And the ship hovers and then flies away, while, of course, both Nixon and Jonathan are arguing and leaving Martha to ask Jonathan, like, what are you going to do, as Nixon is leaving, and Jonathan is saying, whatever I have to do to protect my family, as they walk off together into the environment of the outdoors. So it seems we find out that Jonathan and Nixon are to somehow or another be within this tornado, and the two of them end up being forced into this underground cave where this house is, or this piece of this house is on top of them. And so by the end of episode 21, the dance is to be stopped by this tornado warning, and this guy going on and telling all these students that tornadoes have touched down. And so it's like, well, of course, because Clark is having fun for once in his life. So Clark is to say to Chloe, it's like, well, hey, like, what about my parents? What about Lana? And Chloe's like, well, like, if anything, Clark, we're going to be fine here, but, like, maybe, like, they have figured out a way to, like, to know what's going on, and maybe they're in a much more safer place than we are, kind of thing. But Chloe wants to go and rush off to call Lana to see if she's okay, and when Chloe starts to do that, Clark super speeds away out of this dance to have Chloe realize that Clark is gone. Clark super speeds off to find Lana now screaming for Clark's help. As Lana is now gets sucked into this tornado, Clark is to want to protect Lana, and we have a whole interesting moment that happens in season 2, episode 1, covering what had happened to Lana. So now let's get into season 2, episode 1. So we have Lana that somehow magically appears in the hospital to get her checked out. And she goes on into the hospital to meet up with Chloe. And so Lana is telling Chloe how she was saved by Clark somehow, and she had wrapped herself around him, and Clark was to tell Lana that everything was going to be all right. So Chloe, hearing that news, is very rattled by this. So much so that she's going to plot against Lana to kill her in future episodes. Wouldn't that be the thing? To just have, like, Chloe just become this obsessed woman, and that's how they take her off the show that way? That would have been a really cool story to end that character off of. And I'm really looking at it with Chloe at some point getting obsessed with Clark's story and wanting to uncover secrets somewhere down the road. Why didn't Chloe just become so, like, obsessed with getting Clark all to herself, becoming, like very obsessed about Clark's secret and everything like that? Like, that would have, like, to really end this character on that this character has just become crazed and obsessed. But no, they didn't. Isn't that sad? At some point, I think she ends up finding somebody in the end, and that's how they kind of, like, write off the show towards season 10, somewhere down the road. So, moving on. So, Lex and Lionel. There's so many things to cover here, and I know that I probably mess all this stuff up anyways. So, Lex and Lionel are arguing, and what happens in the mansion is Lionel ends up having some parts of this mansion collapse on top of him, and Lionel is reaching out for Lex, like, "Son, save me." And Lex is like, "Yeah, about that." "Yeah, I don't know, Dad. All of my problems could be solved with this one simple death." And Lex is already starting to lie to people and cover up things. So what's one more cover-up of an accidental death? Yipers. Anyways, so we have that going on, and so Lex is to rescue his father, to bring him to this hospital, where we have a number of doctors going on and theorizing Lionel and his chances, because Lex is to go on and spare no expense and fly a doctor from Metropolis to make his way to see his father. And so the doctors are having ideas that they should probably go on and operate on Lionel to save his life, but he could lose his sight in the process. And so Lex makes the judgment of, like, well, hey, like, go on and save my father regardless if he's going to go blind or not. Foreshadowing to reviews long ago when I've pilot review where I kind of talked about this whole event in very vague like terms, because I didn't remember how it all played out, but I knew it happened eventually. So Jonathan is now with Nixon, and so Jonathan goes on to be almost tempted to kill Nixon and have this item to go on and stab into Nixon. And Nixon is to be shocked because Jonathan goes on and does not kill him. And Nixon is asking Jonathan, it's like, I was going to out your son. Why didn't you go on and kill me? Instead, you freed me instead. And Jonathan's like, well, because, like, it was the right thing to do, kind of a moment. And Nixon's like, well, I'm just going to go on and still, like, reveal your secret to everybody. There's nothing you're going to do. So, we also have Jonathan that is to try to not be next to Lead, because Jonathan knows that Kent is coming for him. And so it's like, hey, like, make sure you're not around Lead, because Clark can't see through Lead. And we have Nixon who's like, your son could see through things? And Jonathan's like, yeah, that's another one of his powers. And he's like, oh my god. So we have, of course, Clark that makes it to Martha to find out that Jonathan had disappeared with Nixon. And Clark is to also ask Martha about the spaceship, and Martha's like, I don't know. I don't know where it is. So, come to find out, the spaceship ended up flying into the air, but then all of a sudden the octagonal shape had separated from the ship, and then the ship somehow landed in some part of Smallville's patch of land. So, Clark is to go on and is to make his way to talk to Lex about this situation. And so at some point while Jonathan and Nixon are underground, Nixon tries to use his phone to contact Lex so they can be saved, and instead Jonathan takes the phone, destroys it, because this will give Nixon any excuse to get his secret out about Clark's powers. And Clark finds out that Lex is in cahoots with Nixon, and he lied about it. And so Lex is like, well, yeah, maybe I did lie. So Clark goes on to the Talon to find out that both Lana and both Martha are to restructure the Talon to help people seek shelter or get people safe. And really this is all to just lead to Martha working with Lana at the Talon. And like that situation may not last very long, but yeah, like it's like Martha getting a job somewhere so they could kind of help with the bills. So Clark is to talk to Martha, and this eventually leads to Clark having these blueprints of the places that are to be around Smallville so they can try to figure out where Nixon and Jonathan had went to. So Clark then is to possibly figure out that Jonathan and Nixon could only be in one location, and so they head on to that place to find out that there is some house that is to be on top of the location that both Jonathan and Nixon are, as they had slid down this hole into this cave. So we had Lana and we had Martha who have this reconnecting moment to the pilot where Lana wants to shake the image of her being that little girl in that princess costume crying about her parents being dead. And Martha is to tell uh, Lana here about her going on and giving her that moment where she was to wish, and Martha was to wish for a son, and miraculously in that same day they had received that same wish granted, and they hug over that moment. So when Clark, Chloe, and Pete are to be shouting out for Jonathan and Nixon, Chloe ends up taking Clark aside and is to tell him, because of her possibly going off to Metropolis with her father, and that all the things kind of going on right now and everything's up in the air, Chloe is to put Clark in the friend zone. And so you would have thought, like, Clark would have tried everything to, like, just get some, like, last moments with Chloe, or to further this relationship, because normally when you would probably go to a dance, you'd probably get something after that. Eh. No? Uh, anyways, considering it was their first date, that's kind of a lot to put on a person. But anyways, like traditionally with like proms and stuff like that, either way, uh, I wouldn't really know because I'd eventually like while going to my prom, I had at some point dance with a girl uh, that I just found there that I had uh, gone on to like know her from like one of these classes that I miraculously had during my senior year. And like I ended up dancing with this girl as well as like dancing with a number of other people that were just like, well, hey, uh, like you're like here by yourself, and I'm just like, yeah, like why not? Like at least to experience a prom, and they're like, oh, okay, all right, well, so uh, so yeah, so we go on to have Clark, who is to use his X-ray vision, I'm assuming, to go on and find out where his father is and where Nixon is. So Clark goes on to get away from Chloe and Pete, and Clark finds exactly where his father and Nixon is to make his way to them. And so all of a sudden we find out while Nixon and Jonathan are fighting it out. And there is some meteorites that end up coming from out of this location, showcasing like, well, I guess what's going to happen to Clark when he gets here. So Clark falls to the meteorites, and now Jonathan is trying to tell Nixon to try to get Clark out of here because of the meteorites, and instead Nixon goes on and is to drop this rock into Clark's like coat and drag him out to say like, hey, like this is my treasure, this is my story that I'm gonna like keep with me. So we have Nixon making his way to trying to drag Clark out of here, and Jonathan comes to Clark's rescue again to beat up Nixon, and is to take the kryptonite and chuck it away. And so Nixon is to grab this kind of uh, this metal stick of some sort, and is to want to go on and hit Jonathan or Clark with this, and all of a sudden there is to be a gunshot. Lex surprisingly arrives, to shoot Nixon, and Nixon is now dead. Finishing up that story that if you know Clark's secret, you're probably going to die, especially if you're a nobody character normally. So, after that all wraps up in a nice, neat little bow, we have Clark telling Jonathan about the time that he was to save Lana during that tornado, and how Clark, it seemed, had the power to control where he was going to get to Lana in her vehicle, because Clark felt that he could go on and fly temporarily. And so Jonathan is like, well, okay, well, like you've floated on top of your bed before, 4 feet above your covers. So, yeah, like, anything could be possible, Clark. It can happen. You're gonna go on and at some point take a whole entire, like, stretch of time jumping off, like barns and whatever, hoping that you can, like, figure out how to fly, but it's never gonna happen, because no flights, no tights. Sorry, people of this show, but at some point, Clark technically, there's a shred of hope that Clark may fly in the show. Besides the way the show ends. So, with that said, now cue us up going to have Lex meet up with Lionel. And Lionel is to mention Lex that the decision he made towards Lionel's health, like, was the right decision. Lionel would have gone on and made the same judgment that Lex did. But Lionel is to also go on and tell Lex that he is now blind. So, we realize that now. So, the last thing that we end up having to talk about here, hopefully I remembered everything by this episode. There's a lot of details to have mowed over. So the last bit of details is by the end of this episode, we have again another Lana Clark moment where Clark and Lana are to be in the barn, and Lana is to try to ask Clark about the whole situation where Lana was saved by Clark. And Clark is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was never there. Like, I don't know what you mean. I think you're imagining all of this, Lana. Like, all of that horrific event just went to your head. I don't know what. Like, so Lana is like, Clark, like, you saved so many people by now. Like, come on, Clark. Like, just tell me the truth. And we're gonna see this whole moment happen so often in this show, where Lana is like, Clark, tell me the truth. And then by season 5, just the truth, Clark. And Clark again is to not want to tell Lana anything, and so Lana is to now tell Clark. It's like, well, Clark, like, you can't go on and hide in this barn forever, Clark. You have to go on and face the music, Clark. You have to do it. So that's how this episode ends up ending. I think I've kind of covered everything that I feel comfortable about calling this one a episode. So let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot, because I'm sure that there probably is. But also let me know how you felt about these episodes, because again, just to hear people's thoughts about certain episodes and how they probably liked them and I didn't, or I was to go on and say, like, besides the one great thing about these episodes, I would go on and just write these episodes off as, for the most part, just okay. Like, it's a way to kind of finish up and start a season, but, like, I thought that these were dragging and so slow, and, like, we've already kind of gone on and had these kind of stories already. There's so many things we've already done here. It's not like we're breaking new ground, really, or we're massively surprised about what's going to play out within these episodes. And so that's why I would go on and just say, like, these episodes were just not that good. So with that said, goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.